Well, hey everyone, thanks for tuning in for this video here. My name is Mitchell. I'm excited to share some information about you all, or for you all, about 45Z, about carbon intensity. Just an incredible emerging opportunity here for farmers, for the conservation ag movement, for the biofuels industry, but just for our rural communities, our rural economies here as well. Tremendous, tremendous opportunity. Throughout this presentation, I'll share what we know today. I'll share what is in the law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and where this 45Z tax credit was birthed from. But keep in mind, at the time that we're recording this, in October of 2024, we still don't know all the final rules. We still don't have all the details from government. We don't know when those details are going to come about. So keep that in mind that by the time you're watching this is what we know today. And there's more updates to come. And we'll sure be on top of it. And that information will get out there when that time is right. So without further ado, let's jump in. So as I said, my name is Mitchell. I'm a seventh generation farmer from Southeast Iowa. We're near Washington, Iowa is where our farm is at. Between our farm that I farm with my parents and the custom farming that we grow about 1,100 acres, mostly corn, soybeans. On our operation, no livestock, but some of the custom stuff we do, there's a cattle operation there. But for the most part, corn, soybeans. And on our farm, we've been very focused on using no-till. Been doing that since 1978. Been really big into cover crops. Been doing that since 2013. Trying to diversify our operation. We do a lot of growing cereal rye, and we've dabbled in an array of other things as well. But trying to just control our cost of production, build soil health, and improve our profitability on our family farm, and leave things better for future generations. I do have two little kids that are part of the eighth generation of our family farm and just trying to leave things better for them. But sustainability is not only about building soil resilience and environmental sustainability, but it's got to be economically sustainable as well. In order to help as many family farms as possible improve their profitability and improve their soil health. Back in 2015, I launched a company called ContinuumAg. We have evolved from being very consulting focused, soil health testing focused, to now being very much data and software focused. And we've really emerged as the MMRV software for carbon intensity. So that's measuring, monitoring, reporting, and verification. So helping farmers to utilize their data to go through our MMRV protocol and be in position to capitalize on this CI opportunity. And again, we don't know all the details yet, but I'll share what we know here today. And Continuum we're in like 43 states and 20 some countries, across millions of acres all over the country, and a lot in Nebraska as well. So excited to share some more with you all here today. Okay, let's dig into this carbon stuff. So I got to set the stage a little bit. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about carbon programs. You've maybe been looking into them. Maybe some of you have enrolled in a carbon program. But really, there is a emerging three different buckets of these different carbon programs, or three different types of carbon initiatives. And so one of them that I'm sure most of you are most familiar with, the main program is in carbon offsets. So in carbon offsets, that's where a farm can be enrolled in a carbon credit program. Usually, you are in this program for multiple years. Usually, it's a multi-year contract, 5 years, 10-year type of contract. And usually, you have to change practices. And the reason being is that to create a carbon offset credit and sell the carbon offset into the voluntary carbon markets, you have to abide by the rules of the carbon market, or the rules of the registry. Registries such as Verra, Climate Action Reserve, Gold Standard, these folks have set the rules. These folks have rolled out these initiatives, very much academic kind of focus programs, but they've developed these rules for the global carbon markets. And as it exists today, only about 1% of the carbon credits that are sold in these global markets actually come from agriculture. Okay, so global markets, global rules, on how to create a carbon credit, and ag is only 1%. That's why some of the rules seem a little funky. Rules like additionality, that you have to change practice and it's a one-time practice change to trigger. That's because of these global rules, or the long-term contracts and a focus on permanence. That's because these are global rules made not just for agriculture, but for other markets as well. And they've just been kind of modified for ag. And because ag is only 1% of these markets, we have to try to be price competitive in these markets against all these other types of carbon credits. And that kind of keeps the price in check. That in ag, there's still a lot of unknowns about how to measure it and exactly what type of impact is being made as far as within these offset markets. So it really keeps the price fairly low, and adoption has been slow. There was a research article done by Farm Journal in their department Trust in Food that found that 93% of farmers know about carbon offset markets, but there's been less than 3% participation. So a lot of awareness, but not much participation. So the industry is really shifting. There's been a bunch of companies looking to carbon inset instead of carbon offsets. And the concept here is you're still developing a carbon credit, but instead of developing the credit and selling it in the voluntary market to any company that could buy it, a carbon inset stays internal to a supply chain. So think carbon offsets, that's like selling a carbon credit to Microsoft or somebody like that. Carbon insets is more like what Cargill, ADM, Nestle, those type of companies have been very focused on carbon insetting. And they've done that because they can be a little bit more creative with the rules. They can usually pass along more of the money to the farmers. They can be more creative on the contract length. I've seen a lot of carbon inset programs that are 1 year, or even a look back program for 1 year, or maybe a 3-year program with more flexibility on opting out. So we're seeing a lot of movement in this angle. I like them. On my own farm, I've never done a carbon offset, but I have participated in carbon inset projects and been able to make some money that way to get us some return on investment for the effort that we were making. And I think there's going to be a lot more of these carbon inset opportunities, usually pretty decent money and more flexibility for the farmers and for those that are creating these credits. But it's still about creating a carbon credit in offsets and insets, just about the rules and where the credits are sold to. Okay, so my favorite opportunity, though, is not developing a carbon credit at all. It's instead quantifying the crop's carbon intensity. So in this concept here, you are quantifying the actual carbon footprint per bushel. And then that carbon footprint of the bushel goes into being part of the equation of the carbon footprint of the gallon of ethanol, or the side of beef, or the 100 weight of milk, or whatever that bushel or that agricultural product is going into, whatever the next piece of the supply chain is. It is just quantifying the actual footprint of the commodity, and then that data stays with the commodity as it travels through the supply chain. The big driver of this new kind of initiative and being able to quantify per bushel, the rules are coming from the government. The rules are coming from the U.S. Department of Treasury. USDA is very involved. The scoring mechanism comes from the U.S. Department of Energy, and they developed this model called the GREET model. It's been around since 1994 and continues to be reiterated and improved upon on an annual basis. And so in carbon offsets and insets, it's carbon offsets, there's registries that set the rules, and insets, the companies can kind of be more flexible with the rules. But in carbon intensity, the government is now becoming involved, and it's more of a regulated market, regulated opportunity. And the unit here is not tons of CO2 or carbon credits, but it's kilograms of CO2 equivalent on a per bushel basis, and then that can be converted for biofuel initiatives, biofuel units. And in that case, it's kilograms of CO2 equivalent per MMBTU. Anyway, to wrap this up, point being is a shift away from trying to play within these global carbon markets to companies looking internal to their supply chain where they can be more flexible, but either quantifying it on a per ton basis or with carbon intensity, quantifying it on a per bushel basis. So what's really driving this is this Inflation Reduction Act and Section 45Z. The Inflation Reduction Act was passed into law back in August of 2022. So it's been in the law for more than 2 years now. And 45Z is the clean biofuel production tax credit for transportation biofuels. So we're talking ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, any transportation biofuel is eligible for this tax credit. So it's not the farmer that gets the tax credit. It's not an animal ag tax credit. It's a biofuel producer tax credit. And in the law, it says that the Congress passed the law. Now the Department of Treasury, the IRS, has to go and actually implement the tax code and create the rules. In the law, it states that the Department of Treasury should use a carbon calculator developed by the Argonne National Lab, which is the national lab that developed the GREET model. It is a part of the US Department of Energy. It's in the Chicago area. But they developed the GREET model. That's what's being pointed to as to be the calculator, to be the mechanism, the model, the mechanism utilized to actually quantify the CI score. And in the law, it says that the tax credit is due to start on January 1, 2025. So as we sit here today, that we're 2 months from that, and all the indication is still this thing starts on January 1, 2025. Now, if you're watching this and the rules have not come out yet, what is likely going to happen is the rules will eventually become solidified at some point in 2025, and they will be retroactive for fiscal year 2025 or tax year 2025. Because keep in mind, this is a tax credit applicable to tax year 2025. So whenever the rules come out, they will point to a start date of January 1, 2025. So at Continuum, we've been helping farmers to get ready for this, helping biofuel producers get ready for this, really just getting their scores, getting their data put together, and trying to make sure that we hit the ground running when this tax credit starts on January 1. In the law, the tax credit is a 3-year tax credit. So that's why we've tried to be very aggressive, saying, let's get ready because we only got 3 years to monetize this thing. Let's rock and roll. There has been bipartisan legislation introduced in both the House and Senate recently to propose to extend this tax credit for 10 years. So very encouraging to see that a bipartisan group of legislators is seeing, hey, this 45Z thing is a big deal. It's going to bring a lot of opportunity for ag, for clean biofuels, and they want to extend the tax credit for 10 years. But like I said, it's been introduced, but that will be taken up at some point later on. We need to get the rules done first, and that is due to happen here very soon. But nonetheless, we have some indication of what's laid out in the law. Biofuel producers for a long time have been looking at decarbonizing anyway. So even before 45Z, they've already been working on decarbonization. Nebraska has been a leader in that with you all's power grid and a lot of ethanol from out there able to play in the California LCFS markets or other low carbon fuel standard markets. So kudos to you guys. On average, according to the Renewable Fuels Association, the average gallon of ethanol has a CI score of 53. The average gallon of gasoline has a score of just about 100. So already today, ethanol has a score nearly half that of fossil fuel gasoline. The tax credit kicks in when the ethanol CI score gets below 50. That's the magic number. For sustainable aviation fuel, it's based on a percentage change, getting below 50% regular jet fuel. But for ethanol, the magic number is get your CI score below 50. I've talked with a lot of ethanol plants in Nebraska already. A lot of your folks are right around 50, some of them even already below 50. So amazing. Now, we don't know all the final calculations, like that definitely is subject to change, but a lot of biofuel producers in and around Nebraska have been really leading the charge to decarbonize, mostly for the low carbon fuel markets, but now they've positioned themselves to really hit the ground running here with 45Z as well. But anyway, magic number, get below 50. each ethanol plant is starting from a slightly different spot. Now, what each plant has to do is they have to run a life cycle analysis of their entire carbon footprint to get that number. So, kind of life cycle analysis 101 here. The plant has 3 different scopes of their carbon footprint. And this is the same for every single company, even all of our businesses too, as farmers. We have a scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 carbon footprint as well. But let's think about it as an ethanol plant today. Again, keep in mind, this is applicable to biodiesel and renewable diesel, so applicable to soybeans, to crush plants, and biodiesel refiners as well. But I'm gonna focus on corn and ethanol for this presentation. At an ethanol plant, the scope 1 carbon footprint occurs at the plant. That is the direct emissions, things that are coming out the smokestack and stuff. And especially within the fermentation process of ethanol, there's a lot of CO2 emissions from the fermentation process. So there's a big scope 1 carbon footprint in terms of what happens at the plant. That's your scope 1. Scope 2 is your indirect emissions coming from your energy usage. Is your energy renewable energy, or is it fossil-based energy? And this is where the Nebraska grid has done a great job of already being quite low carbon footprint energy. The grid itself is, and a lot of plants have been able to tap into that already. Of course, there's more potential opportunity there, but that's the scope 2 carbon footprint. It comes from the energy usage. For an ethanol plant and just about every other type of company, the biggest part of their carbon footprint is the other indirect emissions coming from the supply chain. Namely, for an ethanol plant, this is where the corn factors in, and the transportation of the corn, the transportation of the ethanol. And it's a big part of the carbon footprint. So as an ethanol plant looks to calculate their whole score, they've got to factor in everything, including us on the farm. And then, as an ethanol plant wants to decarbonize and try to tap into this tax credit, they can look at all 3 of these scopes, and they can stack. It's not a one or the other. These are stackable. You can implement as many different initiatives as possible to lower your CI score. And like I said, a lot of plants have already been working on this. So how do you lower your scope 1 emissions? Well, you need to capture that carbon from the fermentation process. You need to capture that CO2 and try to utilize it or store it. And part of that being store it might not be able to be stored directly underground where the plant is. It might need to be piped and stored somewhere else. And obviously, Nebraska has a pipeline project that is in the works. That's one way to reduce your CI. Like I said, you can capture the carbon and use it and stuff like that as well. But you can utilize that carbon capture to make a really big reduction. But of course, they can be costly, and there's hurdles to overcome there. The scope 2 carbon footprint is use more renewable energy. Again, Nebraska is already leading the charge there. You can continue to go further, but it's going to be a big cost, and it takes time. And it takes time to make that kind of incremental change. So the real big opportunity that's on the table, that's ready to go right now, is use low carbon crops. Use more sustainably produced crops and work together with us on the farm. That's available today and doesn't take any capital infrastructure to get it done. So all the options are on the table though, and this just kind of visualizes the opportunity. So laid out in the law is that biofuel producers earn up to 2 cents per point per gallon for every point that they lower their CI score. Now they have to meet some red tape. Prevailing wage, registered apprenticeship. There is red tape that they have to hit. That's why I say it's up to 2 cents per point per gallon. But most of them should be able to meet that with no major issues. So how this works is that annually, each plant will calculate their CI score and report that to the IRS and ultimately create the tax credits that they can either utilize to offset their tax liability, or they can create tax credits and sell them into the secondary market. So you'll calculate your CI score, and say, for example, your score ends up being a 40. So say you're at 50 today, now you get down to a 40. That's 10 points lower than the magic number of 50. Everyone's working off that same magic baseline number 50. Since they're 10 points lower than the 50, 10 points at 2 cents per point is 20 cents a gallon. A lot of ethanol plants figure they're 100 million gallons. 20 cents a gallon, that's 20 million bucks for that ethanol plant in that rural community, and those contributing to lowering that CI score. If you get a pipeline or carbon capture, that can lower your CI score by as much as 30 points. So a lot of plants in Nebraska might be able to get to that 25 or 20 type of CI score. Big reduction. So say you're at a 55 today, you get a pipeline, now you're at a 25. That's 25 points lower than the magic number 50. 25 points at 2 cents, 50 cents a gallon. Big money, big opportunity. And then you can also earn premiums in LCFS markets, like California or Canada. So stackable opportunity there in the tax credit and in these markets. However, even with a pipeline, your CI score would still be at a 25 or a 20. You still got a long way to go to get all the way down to zero. Well, of the ethanol's CI score, the corn contributes 29.1 of the CI points. 29.1. So all of us are given a default score by the Department of Energy here today, and that's 29.1. So we are half or more than half the carbon footprint of the ethanol, if the ethanol is a 50 to 55. So even with carbon capture, even with renewable energy, the corn is still a massive piece of the equation. So the opportunity for all of us is to say, hey, we're actually doing better. We're doing better than 29.1. Don't use the default. Let's collaborate and let's use our real numbers. Let's use our real data and let's prove that we are actually doing significantly better. And the more low carbon corn that can be integrated to the ethanol plant, the lower the carbon intensity of the ethanol and the more tax credit that can be earned. So it's growing the pie. The more collaboration that we can foster, the more money to go around for. And I believe the money here is big enough that the pie, as we slice up the pie, the pieces of the pie for each contributor can be very substantial. So big pie, a lot of opportunity to go around, especially for the conservation discussion here. What I love about this and why I got involved as a regenerative ag soil health guy is the way to lower your CI score is implement a lot of these soil health practices, cover crops, reduce tillage, utilize manure rather than synthetic fertilizer, improve your yield, improve your efficiencies. That all factors into improving your score. So the further you go to implement regenerative practices, the better your CI score and the more financial opportunity that there is. What is also really important about this, going back to the carbon offsets or insets, a lot of those you have to change practice and you only get rewarded based on the change that you are making. Here, it's based on your CI score versus the default or versus the baseline. Again, at least how the law is laid out today and what we know today. So early adopters, folks that already have great CI scores, you're already in an amazing position to help your biofuel producer and maybe go make some money together as a team. If you are new to these practices or thinking about adopting these practices, you can lower your CI score significantly by adopting more conservation practices and be able to tap into the money. So amazing opportunity for folks that are already there, already have great CI scores, already financial opportunity, or you can change. And I think the financials are amazing to be able to do so. So that brings down to farmers. Number one, you need to know what your CI score is. That's critical. That is step number one, is know what your CI score is, which means you need to calculate your full GREET feedstock CI score. We do that for you. We actually do it for free on our website. I'll show that here in a little bit. And at ContinuumAg, we have scored over 300, we're about 330 million bushels that we have scored. And we're helping farmers to determine what is their baseline score versus the default 29.1. We've scored about 330 million bushels. The average score is 11.2. So instead of being 29.1, 11.2. Let's call it an 18-point reduction for slightly easier math. 18-point reduction huge, huge opportunity. So pipeline's about 30 points, but the average bushel of corn we're seeing today will be 18 points. I show the math here of the value per bushel per point is about 5.4 cents. This is very conservative. How this math works is the ethanol plant gets 2 cents per point per gallon. You multiply the 2 cents per gallon multiplied by your conversion ratio of bushels in to gallons out. Conservatively, that is 2.7 gallons per bushel. But in reality, the national average for ethanol production is 2.9 gallons per bushel. So if we're at 2.9 gallons per bushel, that means every point that the farmer reduced their CI score is worth about 5.8 cents per point per bushel. More of reality versus the conservative math that I've got on the screen. So if you're at 5.8 cents, which would be the average, again, that is to share. A farmer is not going to get a premium of 5.8 cents for every point that they reduce their CI score. That's not going to happen. That's the total potential pie that can be shared. So if the value is 5.8 cents per point and the average farm has reduced their CI score by 18 points, that's $1.04 per bushel of value to share. Again, farmer's not going to get $1.04. They're not going to get 90 cents. I don't know what they're going to get. No company has come out definitively with how they're going to share the tax credit yet. There's been a lot of conversation about it. There's been a lot of hearsay. Most plants are talking in the realm of a third to half of the money going to the farmer, but there's been some plants that have said they're going to cover their cost and give 100% of the rest of the money to the farmers. There's a lot of pilot projects that are going on today that are paying just amounts of 2 cents or 5 cents or 8 cents, some up to 15 cents. But those are all pilot projects or for the European market. There's no actual money moving yet for 45Z. So it's all small scale. Again, we don't know the final rules. So on average of 330 million bushels, the average value that the farmers can contribute is about $1.04 a bushel, and then the farmer gets a percentage of that. I was just looking at the numbers before we jumped on the video here. In Nebraska, ContinuumAg has already scored over 27 million bushels of corn, and the average CI score is 7.66. Amazing. So even better than the national average that we're seeing, which not surprised. So 27 million bushels in Nebraska, 7.6. That's a 21.4 point reduction. That'd be worth about $1.24 per bushel is the average. Now, again, I'd encourage farmers, you need to know what your score is. My corn this year on our farm did 2.3. So our CI scores are 2.3. I've got a lot of farms that are in the negatives. Last year, my corn was negative 4.1. Soybeans can be scored as well. The default score for soybeans is about a 42 and change. My soybeans this year were a -9. In Nebraska, we've scored about 2 million bushels of soybeans, and the average CI score there is a 17. So instead of being up at 42, the average soybean in Nebraska, as our quick data is here today, 17. Pretty dang good. So point being is, yeah, pipelines are important. Yeah, more renewable energy is important, but the farmers are already doing a tremendous job. We just need to actually connect the farmer data to those biofuel producers, and then you can look at opportunities to decarbonize even further. But the math here is going to be different for every ethanol plant. I have no idea what the farmer will get paid today. The value is nothing. We don't even have the rules. All I can tell you is it's going to take data. If you don't have data, you're not going to get nothing. Same for the ethanol plants. If you don't have data, you're not going to be able to create the tax credits. You're not going to be able to go and resell those tax credits in the secondary market. You're not going to be able to pass through IRS audits. Like, it's going to be data is really the critical thing here, and that's what we've got to work on and what we can control, what we can be doing here today. So, like I said, we've scored a lot of bushels already, about 1.7 million acres, seeing tremendous value there. But just scoring is not enough. just running a score, like that's not gonna be enough. You've got to be able to back it up. You got to be able to prove that that score is legit. So, ContinuumAg, we've developed a proactive MMRV protocol. So measuring, monitoring, reporting, verification. We're the only one that I'm aware of to proactively get farmers verified, where the farmers own their data, the farmers own the verification, and then you're in position to be able to help your biofuel producer or help this industry decarbonize and tap into these tax credits. So the program that we've set up is at topsoil.ag. You can go create a free account there, topsoil.ag on any browser or whatever. It's best on a computer. You can do it on a phone, but it's not as it's just small and harder to utilize. But anyway, you can go in there, fill out a farm profile of what are your typical farming practices, and then you can see your CI score totally free. Our actual program for verification, we enroll and we charge farmers on a per acre basis. We have a dealer network, and we're continuing to expand our network to collaborate with local agronomy authorities who already have a lot of the data and who can help farmers to get their data in. So that's how Continuum actually makes money here, is that we charge to help farmers through the verification, and then we've brought in a third-party verifier. The process there is to onboard and integrate your existing data. So we integrate with your John Deere Ops Center or FieldView or whatever it is. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. We document the practices throughout the whole year, and it's everything. It's very, very thorough. Fertilizer, manure, tillage, cover crop, pesticide usage, energy usage. So for irrigated acres, you're going to have to document the energy that you're using. The amount of water doesn't matter today, but the energy used to pump the water, that does matter. Energy for drying corn, if you're drying corn, all that stuff. So very thorough documentation process, and that happens field by field. At the end of the year, there's an attestation, just like you do for other federal crop programs or crop insurance. There's an attestation. We send along the data to the third-party verifier. We work with a group out of Des Moines called Eco Engineers. They're one of the leaders in the biofuels carbon accounting space. And they are our third-party verifier. So farmers that go through our program, they go through an audit done by Eco Engineers. And then we have also built out a marketplace to help farmers document that these certificates were created. You get price discovery, and you can see what are the ethanol plants paying, and then you can choose to sell your CI certificates to the ethanol plant of your choosing. So really trying to just build the infrastructure. And I'll interject here that I've built everything at this company, and me and my team of we're a couple dozen employees today. We've built it for ourselves. And on my farm, my CI score, like I shared on my corn this year, is a 2.3. My soybeans are a -9. I'm trying to figure this out for myself of how do I help my local ethanol plant? How do I help my local crusher? How do we go make some money together? And it really boils down to data. That just saying my score is a 2.3, that doesn't matter. I've got to have it through a third-party verification, a third-party audit, for that to really be able to hold true and be worth top value for them and for me. So as I work towards kind of wrapping the slides and stuff here, if you'd like to get your score, I definitely encourage you to do so. We've built a free system to do it. You can also just Google the GREET model and you can go download it. It's very complicated. It takes a long time. In topsoil, I actually have a video on the ContinuumAg YouTube page you can go find, where I walk through step by step of starting an account, filling out your farm profile, getting your score. The whole process, the video is 6 minutes long. Very, very simple to go and get your topsoil, get your CI score. You can go to topsoil.ag, fill out a farm profile, start with just corn and soybeans. There is an ability to score sorghum, but we have not automated that in topsoil today. If you would like to score sorghum, send me an email, connect with me. I can have somebody help run it manually for you. But corn and soybeans, we have automated in the software. So you check the box on which crops you're growing. You fill out a basic farm profile. What are your typical practices? Do you use a cover crop? If so, what's the typical date, typical species, typical rate? What's your fertilizer program? Do you use manure? Do you use synthetic fertilizer? so on, tillage, pesticides, and so on. But this is just your default practices, just kind of typically what do you do? And from there, you can save that number. It shows you your CI score automatically. This was a fairly conventional farm here in Southeast Iowa. Their score is 22. Not bad. It's better than being 29 and taking the default. And to the ethanol plant, that generated a value of about 35 cents a bushel, maybe 84 bucks an acre. Again, that's got to be shared. I don't know what the farmer would get or if they would qualify or how this is going to work, but that's what the law lays out here today. We've built this calculator tool here, though, that you can toggle practices for your own farm and see what would move the needle. So if you're thinking about some of these conservation practices or your score today is fine, but you want to see how could it be better, we've built this calculator tool. I already did it here on the screenshot where I checked the box and said, well, what if I did a cover crop? That's the only difference here between the left score and the right score. As I checked the box for cover crop, I tapped recalculate, ran the scores at 14-point reduction just for doing a cover crop. And that's fairly typical. It's county by county base, so you have to test your own county, but cover crops are a big driver. Manure, in a lot of cases, can get 10, 12, 14 points of reduction from using manure. Going to no-till is usually about 8 or 9 points. Just strip till is usually about 4 or 5 points. Your yield, your fertilizer usage, that all gets factored in. So I would encourage you to go see what your score is today at Topsoil. Toggle practices. If you're, and definitely be thinking about how can you lower your CI of your 2025 crop as we're making those decisions right now. You can do soybeans as well. All the same tools are there. But in here, what's amazing too, again, changing from no cover crop to cover crop increased the total financial value by what, almost 80 cents a bushel and what, $280 an acre, like, or $180 an acre. Amazing, amazing financial opportunity. I don't know what the farmer cut of that is going to be, but if the new pie is 180 bucks or thereabouts, I mean, this is 240 bushel corn, right? It's good yields, about 240 bushel corn. The value there created of 180 bucks an acre. Again, I don't know what the farmer cut is going to be. If it's a quarter of that or maybe a third of that or something somewhere along those lines, I don't know yet. But we're talking pretty serious financial opportunity for to make us really think about adopting more of these soil health building practices. So that's why I like it. I think more farmers should be doing that. I think it's going to make you more profitable, more resilient. And this is a tax credit. It could definitely go away at any point, but it's here and it's the cards that we've been dealt. I think we need to make hay while the sun's shining. So we have a lot of info and insights on what moves the needle. This just shows cover crop is the biggest thing that moves the needle. Reducing tillage is big as well. Utilizing manure is huge. Reducing your synthetic fertilizer, improving your yield, and so on. So, but you can go to Topsoil and play around with it and go from there. Happy to share more. A lot of material on the ContinuumAg website. A lot of material on our YouTube page. We do Q&A webinars every Tuesday morning. We call it the CI Chit Chat. A lot of material out there. So happy to help and take additional questions for anyone that's looking at this. I skipped over a couple slides that maybe should have had in here, but let me hit on non-biofuel here for a hot minute. Obviously, a lot of the crop grown in Nebraska does not go to biofuels. A lot of it does, but not all of it. This tax credit, I'm so bullish on, or I'm bullish on the concept here of carbon intensity because the ripple effect that this is going to make. And I believe that the financial opportunity here, or this tax credit, it has the ability to set a precedent. That's what I'm getting at. And the setting a precedent about how to quantify carbon footprint, how to verify it, how to track it throughout the supply chain, how to monetize it. We're setting a precedent here that the farmers and the grain farmers are the initial starting point of these solutions. So the financial opportunities, though, are for biofuels. So what's the livestock industry going to do? At the short term, you better be ready. You might have to compete against this and compete against government coming in and propping up one portion of the industry and not another. Been there, done that. That's nothing new to livestock producers. It's been happening for a long time. So you got to be ready for it, and you got to be able to play within that. What I believe is going to happen here is a lot of those corporates, a lot of financial institutions are trying to figure out how to decarbonize. And now the CI is setting a precedent that they can go and utilize, they can go and leverage. And I believe there's going to be a tremendous opportunities for low CI corn and soybeans to stay within livestock verticals. Low carbon silage to produce low carbon beef, for example, low carbon corn to go into low carbon pigs or milk or poultry or whatever, eggs, whatever it's going to be. For example, been the of the pork industry, about 58% of the carbon footprint of the pigs, 58% of their carbon footprint comes from the feed, the corn. So if the pork industry is going to try to decarbonize, for beef cattle, it's like 55% of their carbon footprint comes from the feed. For dairy cows, it's about 45% of the carbon footprint comes from the feed. So as the livestock industry is looking to decarbonize, it's not just only about the farts and burps and stuff like that that you get blamed for, but the big part of the footprint is from what those animals are eating. And especially if they're eating grain or if they're eating, um, these row crop products. So if the low carbon grains are now being incentivized to go to biofuel, that means that the high carbon grains are what's going to be left over for the livestock industry as they start quantifying their carbon footprint. So that's going to drive a need for financial mechanisms to be put into place to keep that low carbon grain in the animal ag supply chain. So very bullish on opportunities there. The ripple effect that's going to be caused outside of biofuels, outside of just corn, soybeans, the ripple effect beyond even the Midwest, beyond the US. I'm already seeing stuff going on down in Brazil and other parts around the world. Like this credit and this initiative really creating a ripple effect that it's not going away. It's going to continue to be here. And I think it's a good. I think it's overall going to be a good thing. We need to tell our story. Again, the Department of Energy and the U.S. government today thinks that our CI score is 29.1. They think that we're polluting a lot, but the average farmer in Nebraska is only releasing a carbon emission at a rate of 7.6. Like you're so much better than what the government's giving you credit for. We just got to be able to tell that story, because if this doesn't work out with the carrot, they could easily end up going to the stick. And they think that we're at 29 here today. And in reality, the mass majority of farmers are significantly better. So I think we got to tell that story. The other piece of this is I'll stop here. We're documenting these practices to calculate a carbon outcome, but I believe that there's going to be the same type of or similar calculations ran for other types of outcomes. So not just a carbon intensity score, but maybe scoring of financial mechanisms around your impact on water quality or your impact on biodiversity, your impact on water utilization, and on the aquifer and stuff. There's going to be those type of other impact scores and stuff that I think are going to emerge out of this as well. Now, I don't know what the financial mechanisms are going to be there, and that's what's going to take, at a minimum, all of this data capture and calculations and verification. It costs money. So at a minimum, you got to be able to create a financial mechanism that actually creates some type of return on investment for doing the math and doing all the data work. And I just don't know yet where that money is going to come from. Where in this case, it's tax credits that's driving it for CI. And again, the ripple effect, though, that's going to make beyond CI is why I'm so bullish on this, and why I'm happy to share my thoughts and ideas. Happy to discuss it more. But that's my thoughts as it exists here today.